Hello, everyone. My name is Holden Hardman. Thank you so much for joining me again for another video. Today, I'm joined with Pastor and Jeremy. When we were doing the Evil Dead trilogy, we had the nephew of the VFX artist that is a fan of the channel that watches, and he was like, you know, I can reach out to my uncle who did the VFX work and just connect you guys. And so he did, and we talked a little bit, and I was like, hey, would it be okay if we did an interview with you? Because that's awesome. And he agreed. And so we're going to give him a phone call here, and I asked some of my patrons if they had any questions in particular as well if they wanted to know. We have questions, I know, and he said he's down to answer whatever. So
it's pretty exciting. I can't wait.
I know.
This should be pretty cool to get some insight from the man himself.
Yeah. Because that's one of the high points that we spoke about.
Oh yeah.
You know, during the making of the watch along. So
yes. So let's go ahead and give him a call.
How's it going?
Hey, it's going good. I really appreciate you agreeing to do this interview with me. I have a couple of the guys here from the My Friend Watches. I have Jeremy and Pastor.
Hi, guys.
Tom, what's up, buddy? Good to talk to you. I appreciate you coming by and talking some movies with us.
yeah, same. It's
Happy to.
we're pretty giddy about this.
Oh, good. Well, I have all the answers.
All right, all the answers.
First off, just how did you even get included into the Evil Dead, like with Sam Raimi, and how did that even get started? Where they're like, hey, this is what I do. And how did they bring you in, and just how did it all start?
My initial influence was when I was 5. One morning, my brother and I turned on the TV, and the original King Kong was just beginning. Just that phenomena of stop-motion animation was fascinating to me. So I grew up doing that and bought a Super 8 camera and started doing my own stop-motion films. My wife wanted to go up to MSU to get a career, to go to college and everything. And that's where I met Sam Raimi and Rob Tappert and Bruce Campbell and Scott Spiegel and some of the other guys. And they were going to college up there. But Bruce wasn't, but everybody else was. So I just met them through that. And then we'd go over to their apartment afterwards and get high and talk movies.
Nice.
That's
and
awesome.
I was more special effects things, but I wanted to be a director. Sam was already had like 30 or 40 films, short films under his belt. He was an encyclopedia of film knowledge and film production and film assembly. He could analyze films like amazing. He's like 19 when I met him, but he started writing the Book of the Dead. He'd been to a class on Egyptian mythology or something, or history, and learned about the Book of the Dead and the Egyptian Book of the Dead and thought that was a cool name for a title. And it is. And so he started writing one, but then the question came up, and Rob Tappert's getting involved with us because didn't previously have a strong interest in film production or anything like that. So they're kind of working on how to turn this into a commercial enterprise. And they realized that Sam needed to make a short horror film so that they could show investors how to, that he could tell a story, get an audience, go, stop and handle a more complex production than previous. That became Within the Woods.
About
a half-hour thing long. Everybody's in it. Ellen Sandweiss, Bruce Campbell, Scott Spiegel's in it.
When you and Sam were talking, did you get the impression in those early kind of conversations that you were setting out to make a horror comedy in Evil Dead, or is it something that you guys always intended to feel more like a straight-up horror? Like, what was the temperature in those conversations like? I
think we were just gonna the script does not read like a dark humor comedy thing.
Okay.
There's none of that's written in. That's clearly from Bruce and Sam and Rob. The thing about Sam is he just devours movies, and his attitude was you torture the audience. First, you have to hit him in the forehead with a sledgehammer, and that would be the Vine Tree Rate of Cheryl.
Yeah.
And then you torture them. You have the characters turn into deadites. Where hey, you're my buddy, you're my friend, you're my girlfriend, and and then suddenly you turn into a monster, and just as I'm getting ready to kill you, you turn back into your friend and you're pleading for help and all that. And that's screwing with the audience. That's torturing them.
What's really drawn me to the Evil Dead movies, because there's this generational gap, but there's still this relatability because I do YouTube full time, but we're all kind of these low budget filmmakers. We just love film. We just love movies. And so I know for me, being a kid using my parents' camera, I had YouTube to watch. How did they do that kind of effect in Jaws where it like zooms in on him, but the backlight goes far away, and I can just YouTube that. Whereas you guys didn't have that type of thing. And yet I still look at y'all's work and I'm like, how are they pulling this off? And in those ways, it's very, very inspiring to me. And that's why I look up to what you guys did. And that's why I love Sam Raimi's work. And why I love that you're involved in it too. I know Jeremy has a couple other questions for you here as well.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking a minute to talk with us. This stuff is incredibly fascinating for me, so I could keep you on here longer than we have, I'm sure. But I did want to ask you, like, when you revisit these films, which I assume you've done from time to time, and you're going back, is there a particular setup? Is there a particular effect that when it shows up on screen, people have no idea how much legwork? And this is probably true of all of the effect sequences that you guys did, but is there one in particular that you feel like you guys put a lot of extra energy or TLC into, and what would be your favorite from the franchise?
I would say from the finale of the original Evil Dead film, the clay animation meltdown.
Oh, yeah. It's a great shot.
That just one of those really lucky things, me loving stop motion animation, although I'm more of a Harryhausen guy. I wanted to move a puppet around.
Yeah.
And when I got the script and asked Sam what he saw for it, he wanted me to build like balloon bodies of Scotty and Cheryl and fill them with smoke and have them deflate. Instead of dissolving or anything, they would just deflate. After all the gore and violence and action and tension, it seemed like a kind of a, unsatisfying ending to it.
Sure.
So I came up, I've always loved stop motion, and of course I've tried to see every stop motion film. I own pretty much all of them right now. The Time Machine with Rod Taylor.
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite movies.
At the very end, he's in the Sphinx tomb, finds his time machine, jumps in it, kicks a Morlock, one of the attacking underground dwellers, against a part of the cave, and it breaks its neck. He jumps into the machine, pushes it forward, and as he's traveling forward in time, trying to recover, he looks over at the Morlock, and it's decomposing via clay animation.
Yeah.
And the skin decrepits, the eye falls out, the skull falls off. It's like 3 shots. Sold him on the idea of, like the time machine, but let's turn it into an entire sequence in just a couple of shots.
I got one more for you. We can go over it as fast as you'd like to, but I'm just real curious because you seem like, as Holden just now said about all of us, you had a very DIY spirit. You were working outside of the studio system. You guys were miles and miles away from Hollywood, which is the traditional wisdom or whatever. So when you made Into the Woods and you made Evil Dead in particular, there was very little studio oversight, I'd imagine, compared to having so much more resources, so many more extras, all these things that you had kind of alluded to with Army of Darkness. What do you feel like gave you the most freedom? Was it the resources with the studio oversight, or was it the ingenuity of doing it on your own but not having the resources?
Boy, they both got ups and downs. Like poor Sam dealing with the studios in the Spider-Man films. He'd made 3 of them. They all make like over $500 million each. When it comes to number 4, it's like, maybe not.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, holy
That's
cow,
a sore spot for me in particular, Tom. I love those movies.
That's the downside. On the other hand, Sam got to make, $150 million or whatever movies.
Yeah.
And for a kid who, appreciated that toy box, holy cow, and the amazing stuff he did with it. I mean, he, created the Spider-Man look and feel to how he travels through a city. And I heard an interesting thing about how he did that. He hired, when he was doing his proposals for Spider-Man, he hired 2 storyboard artists, like 2 of the best, and gave them, they were separate from each other, gave them the same scene, see what they came up with, and he mixed and matched the best ideas.
Yeah, that is clever.
And that became his presentation. And I guess he did the same thing with the editing, is he had two different guys with the same footage and go off and do their thing, and then he took what worked, you know?
Pastor, I know you got a question for Tom here as well.
I just one question. Did you know when you made when you got to work on the original Evil Dead, did you know that it was going to become this huge, this was going to have this following, and like you said, it was going to have all these different mediums that came from it? Did you know that the fans would accept it the way they did?
Absolutely not. None of us did. I think the objective was to make it so that Sam could make a second movie.
Yeah. Pastor and I went to a panel with him, and Sam jokingly was like, we ended Evil Dead 2 with him being in like this medieval time, and if the investors wanted to see what would happen, they'd have to fund Army of Darkness.
Pony up.
Yeah.
The consensus was, hey, if this movie plays in a drive-in down in Texas for fun, one weekend, we can say we made a feature film.
Yeah, we love it. I got a couple more questions here for you, Tom, if you got just a little bit longer, if that's okay.
Sure do, sure.
These are a couple that I'm curious about, too. I'm handpicking these. I have a few patrons. It's kind of like this private little area on YouTube where, they can talk to me, and I just let them know that I'm going to be talking to you. If they had any specific questions, they could ask them. So here are just a couple, and feel free to take as long or as short as you like. This one is from Dimitri, who said, what monster or demon was your favorite, either to work on or just in general?
I'd say the flying deadite from the finale of Evil Dead 2.
Hell yeah.
Uh-huh.
I designed and built and animated that creature.
Yeah.
And if you watch, there's one shot where it's flying and you're looking at its left side. It's facing left. And in between the wing flap, you can actually see its smile. It created its evil, big, wide smile.
Yeah.
So go back and check that out in Evil Dead 2.
Oh, definitely.
Thank you. You might have just answered this. I don't know. This is another one. What was the trickiest effect to get right?
Well, there was one that was kind of fun that just kind of occurred, and that's the blood-puking dagger hilt. A little skull that starts puking blood.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
And, all I have to do is take a little drill and drill from its mouth to the back of the head, stick a rubber tube in there, tape it down, and then just tell Sam, have somebody do a close-up of the tube bleeding, of the mouth bleeding, while somebody blows the tube, and it's wound up as a shot.
You already answered one of these. This question is, who were some of your influencers, and what movies inspired you?
Well, I grew up with Famous Monsters magazine, so it was everybody from Jack Pierce and the Westmore brothers and, the guys from the 60s, who did Planet of the Apes and Dick Smith.
Yeah.
And then Ray Harryhausen in stop motion, and Willis O'Brien, Jim Danforth, Dave Allen. Gosh, it goes on and on.
Here's one. You kind of answered a little bit of this when you were talking about how they kind of gave you the script for the first Evil Dead 3 weeks before shooting started. But
sounds like Holden.
Yeah.
In a way.
it does sound like me. When we did our Halloween short, I literally told Jeremy, okay, we're going to do a whole scene. It's not in the script, but we're going to film in the water. So that is kind of like me. But here's the question. It's, what were the biggest challenges faced with creating the effects for the first movie other than the budget?
There wasn't anything that wasn't available when Sam needed it. And despite the lack of time and the crude materials that I had, fortunately, I'm a genius, so it all worked out. I just remember being on this creative high the whole time. It was a lot of fun. It was like being on the Three Stooges set all the time, because they're doing gags. They've all got a zillion characters, and they're doing gags. And Sam's not an authoritarian screamer yeller kind of director. It was just explain things, and he had his way of shooting. He was shooting shot for shot, pretty much. You could almost can't edit it in the camera, but it's really weird because I can watch every time I see Evil Dead, and I've seen it 100 times at least. It's like watching a home movie, because I can tell you where I was standing or sitting or squatting or up on the beams in the ceiling.
You sound still very passionate about it, which is very refreshing for me. I love that. Is that something that you've moved on to other things, and that's just something you're very proud of, and that's about it, and you kind of entertain a couple of nerdy guys like us that still look back on those movies and love them, or even being introduced to them for the first time? Is that something that you've moved on, you kind of are doing other things in life, or is it still something that's still actively involved in your life currently?
Well, until the pandemic hit, I was doing, horror film conventions in the Midwest. That didn't start until like 20 years after Evil Dead. Meeting fans and finding out what the film meant to them is amazingly cool, because I remember seeing King Kong when I was a kid, to bring it back to that, and the energy that Willis O'Brien and that team put into that film, went through this little old black and white TV screen to a kid in Franklin, Michigan, and then, inspired me, or, it became like an obsessed disease.
Yeah.
And I had to learn more about it, and dinosaurs and filmmaking and how do they do all this stuff, because hardly a convention goes by where somebody doesn't walk up and says, hey, I just working on my first film and it's because I saw your work in Evil Dead or something.
I myself have gone to one horror convention so far, Spooky Empire down in South Florida, and
that's where we met Sam.
That's where we met Sam, and we met Bruce and
I
Ted.
did that once.
Nice.
It was an amazing show.
Oh, I loved it.
Huge.
Yes, when we met Sam, he had this very soft-spoken kind of guy, and I don't know if that's meeting people all day long or whatever, but I thought that was kind of cool. And I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, so that was my first exposure to Sam Raimi, and I had this little limited edition thing I wanted him to sign from like one of the first DVDs, and I told him your Spider-Man films were really impactful for me, and he said that. Thank you so much. That made my whole day. And he had just talked to 300 other people prior to me, and I'm like, I was joking with him. He's like, he probably says that to everyone, but I don't care. He said it to me still.
Right.
So I guess, is he like that for real, or is it you? Well, you kind of even answered that he's not really a dictator type of director and type of thing.
You got the Sam I knew. He was always friendly. The best part is he left me alone. Like even on the finale, they were in New York editing the film. And so Bart and I were just pushing out footage. And, he had seen my storyboards and everything. They'd get the footage and we'd get word they liked it.
Yeah, Tom, before I do wrap this thing up, I want to say that your enthusiasm and that energy that you took into making Evil Dead, it translates. You can see it in all three of the films.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's something that literally oozes off the screen, my man. And talking to you, I can feel that same enthusiasm. And I think that's just such a powerful thing because... like you said, you have contributed to the zeitgeist in a film that's going to live on for generations and generations, just like Jack Pierce before you, just like Ray Harryhausen before you, and you have been added to that pantheon of greats and people that others are going to look to as an inspiration. So I really do appreciate you taking a minute to talk with us.
Yes,
definitely. Oh, well, once COVID's over, we hope to get to meet you at a con.
I was going to say, Tom, if you ever make your way down to Northwest Florida, or Florida in general, we drove 7 hours to see Sam at Spooky Empire, but if you ever make your way down here, we'd love to come to a convention and see you, and, once the pandemic kind of settles down a little bit. And thank you so much for agreeing to talk with all of us. I know it meant a lot.
Hey, thanks, guys. I appreciate your kind comments. You've made my day, let me tell you.
Oh,
good, man. Good.
Well, thank you, Tom. We appreciate it, man. You have a good rest of your day, okay?
Okay, you take care, guys.
All right, take care. All right, bye-bye. I know that a guy like him is just like a guy, but it's still so cool just to get the opportunity to talk to somebody that was so closely involved.
I was waiting for because I knew one of us was going to bring it up, the whole con thing, because that's all, I don't know about you guys, but that's all I have, even living in New York. That's the only exposure I have where you can actually talk to a celebrity that they don't feel bombarded. They're like, they know that that's what they're there for. So I was wondering if he did that when you started asking what he does now.
I don't know if he answered if he still does horror or still does stop motion, but just that, I guess in the sense that people still reach out to him and want to talk about Evil Dead. He kind of gave this the window of it took about 20 years before, I guess probably the next generation growing to start asking him questions and start being super excited from the filmmaking perspective.
Yeah. He answered everything. I mean, answered it like it was the first time he was asked.
I could have talked to him forever, but yeah, I feel like, Pastor, to your point of conventions being a place where you can actually connect with people, this has been another great platform for that,
100%. Yeah.
I feel like, as you mentioned, Holden, these are people, but it's their work that we respond to, that we have this connection with them. And then when you can just sit there and connect with them on a human level and just kind of laugh and stuff, it really reinforces that thing of we're all just kind of in this space together, and that's a really powerful thing.
I broke my rule. I usually don't like to ask somebody who's like the primary focus about how somebody else is, you know, and I was really trying to, you know, obviously Sam Raimi directed the movies or whatever, but I literally was like, you know, when we met him, Sam was nice. Is he really like that?
Yeah. But I mean,
so that was
understandable.
Yeah. I don't. I mean, I get where you're coming from with that, but I honestly am happy that you asked that because, you know, Sam is the overarching, you know, concept
director,
of he, and not just that, but like everything. Like, you know, he's why we're interested in it, because we're like, what movie did he make? And then we get to find out that there's other people involved, and the fact that we know he's humble enough to be himself to us as he is to his close friends and coworkers, you know.
Very true. Very true. That's it. Leave this video a like if you enjoyed. Comment down below letting us know what you think of talking to Tom Sullivan. What'd you think of the Evil Dead movies as well? Subscribe if you want to see more fun content like this. Consider joining me on Patreon for the opportunity to get your questions answered in some other interview with some other person. I try to do cool stuff like that when I can. As always, make sure to subscribe to these two guys. I'll have their links in the description below. As always, we appreciate you watching. We'll catch you in the next video. Take care.